All right, so today we're going deep, really deep, into a side of the internet that most people try to avoid.
Oh yeah, we're talking the underbelly, the dark web.
Exactly. And to guide us, we've got this pretty intense YouTube documentary called Dark Web, Gun Ez, Kidnapping and More, The Disturbing Side of the Internet.
Just the title alone is enough to make you want to double-check your privacy settings.
No kidding. But that's kind of the point of this deep dive, right? To
Yeah.
get a clearer picture of what's really happening out there, like how this hidden world actually works and what kind of impact it has on our lives.
And what really struck me watching this documentary was, I mean, everyone uses the internet every day, but this shows you there's this whole other level underneath it all.
Yeah, like another world hidden in plain sight. And it's
Yeah.
a world where pretty much anything goes because everyone is, well, anonymous.
Right, anonymity is the key here. It's what allows all this illegal activity to flourish.
So let's start unpacking this whole dark web marketplace thing. Like, what is it?
Well, they describe it in the documentary as a digital Wild West, like imagine eBay or Amazon, but for illegal goods and services.
So you're saying I could order like a hitman along with my new headphones?
Well, I mean, I don't know about hitmen, but you get the idea. Drugs, weapons, stolen data, fake documents, you name it, it's all there.
That's wild. They gave some pretty crazy examples in the film, like, what was it, Colombian cocaine for 40 bucks?
Yeah, 40 bucks for cocaine.
Yeah.
And a UK passport, like a totally legit looking fake one for 6 grand.
6 grand. That's insane. It's kind of terrifying how easy it seems to be.
Well, that's the thing. The dark web makes it all just a click away.
And what makes it so different from the regular internet? Like, how do they stay hidden?
Well, the main thing is this tool called Tor. It's like, imagine sending a letter, but you route it through a bunch of your friends first before it gets to the recipient.
Ah, so no one knows where it really came from.
Exactly. It's untraceable. That's kind of how Tor works. It bounces your internet connection all over the world, so it's almost impossible to track.
So basically, criminals can operate in secret, doing whatever they want.
Pretty much. And the documentary, they had this really interesting case, Alphabay, this huge dark web marketplace that the authorities eventually shut down.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was making like a crazy amount of money, right?
Yeah, close to $500 million a year.
500 million. Jeez. It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
I know, right? And the story of the founder, Alexander Case, it's so fascinating. He didn't start out as some big-time criminal mastermind.
Yeah, it said he started out selling stolen logins and stuff online. Pretty small-time cybercrime.
Yeah, but then somehow he makes this jump to running this massive global criminal operation.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what was going through his head?
Right. What could make someone go from petty theft to, like, international kingpin?
I think the documentary kind of hints at the answer.
Mm.
It's this combination of, well, first you've got the anonymity, like you're shielded, no one knows who you are.
Right, you can be whoever you want.
And then on top of that, there's this potential for insane profits. Like we're talking millions, maybe billions of dollars. It's got to be intoxicating.
Yeah, that kind of power and money could definitely corrupt anyone.
For sure. It's a classic tale of ambition gone wrong, getting seduced by the dark side.
Speaking of things that are hard to trace, the documentary kept mentioning Bitcoin, right? Like, it's the currency of the dark web.
Oh, yeah, Bitcoin's a big part of it. It's decentralized and, to a certain degree, untraceable.
So it's basically like digital cash.
Pretty much.
Uh,
You can make transactions without revealing your identity, which makes it super hard for law enforcement to follow the money trail.
right, it's not like they can just trace it back to a bank account like with regular money.
Exactly. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to these investigations.
So you've got these hidden marketplaces, anonymous users, untraceable currency. It all sounds impossible to police.
It's definitely challenging, but law enforcement isn't just sitting back and watching.
Yeah, what can they even do? It's like trying to catch smoke. You shut down one site, like Alphabay, and they just pop up somewhere else.
Right, but they have some clever strategies. They talked in the documentary about this thing called an exit scam.
An exit scam.
Yeah, basically, sometimes they'll take down a marketplace,
Yeah.
but instead of actually shutting it off, they'll keep it running.
Really? Why would they do that?
Well, they'll make it look like business as usual so they can lure in more users and gather evidence.
Ah, so they're basically setting a trap.
Exactly. It's a way to catch more criminals and disrupt the network.
That's actually pretty smart.
It's a constant cat and mouse game between law enforcement and these cyber criminals.
So it's not all bad news then. But there was another part of the documentary that was, well, really disturbing.
Oh, yeah, the stuff about sextortion.
Yeah, that was rough. It's hard to believe people actually do that kind of stuff.
I know, it's awful. You get tricked into this compromising situation online, and then they threaten to expose you unless you pay them money.
And the documentary, they had that story about Daniel Perry, the 17-year-old who, well,
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. It just shows you the devastating impact this can have on people's lives.
it's just awful. And what really surprised me is that they were talking about the Philippines as like a hub for sextortion.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. But the documentary showed how this woman, Maria Caparas, was running this huge sextortion ring from like this regular village,
And she was making millions.
millions of pounds.
Yeah.
And she had all these young people working for her, carrying out these scams.
It's crazy. How does she even pull that off?
She was using all these really sophisticated techniques, like pre-recorded videos, social engineering tactics to build trust, and then, of course, they were using information people post online to exploit them.
It's scary to think how much information we put out there without even thinking about it.
I know, right? And with social media, it's so easy to create these fake profiles and pretend to be someone you're not.
Yeah, and it's easy to get tricked, especially if you're not careful.
Exactly. These criminals, they prey on people's vulnerabilities, they manipulate them, and they know exactly how to push the right buttons.
It's just messed up. And it makes you wonder, like, how can they even stop this stuff? It seems almost impossible.
It's definitely a challenge. There are all these data privacy issues. It's hard to get information from social media companies. And then you have the whole jurisdictional nightmare when these crimes cross borders.
Right. It's like the Wild West, but online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And social media, it kind of makes it worse. It gives these criminals easy access to information. They can stay anonymous, and they can create these fake profiles.
So what? Are we all just supposed to delete our social media accounts and never go online again?
Not necessarily. But we do need to be more aware of the risks.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway here. Awareness is key.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about staying safe online. It's about understanding the human element in all of this. Like, the documentary showed that even seemingly ordinary people can get pulled into this world, both as victims and as perpetrators.
That's a good point. It's easy to think of cyber criminals as like these shadowy figures in hoodies, but it's not always like that.
Nope. It could
No.
be anyone, your neighbor, your coworker, even someone you know online.
That's a sobering thought.
It is. But it's important to remember, we can't let fear control our lives,
Yeah.
but we do need to be informed and cautious.
Well said. And, the documentary didn't stop there. They also went into this whole thing about wildlife trafficking happening on social media.
Oh, yeah, that was another shocking one. I had no idea that was even a thing.
Me neither. But apparently platforms like Facebook and Instagram are being used to buy and sell endangered species.
It's crazy. The documentary, they talked about this study where these researchers just spent 30 minutes looking at these Facebook groups. They found over 300 animals being offered for sale illegally just in those 30 minutes.
300 animals. Geez, that's wild. I mean, who even buys these animals?
Well, it's a mix of things. Some people, they want exotic pets, something unique.
Right, like a status symbol.
Yeah, and social media, it fuels that desire.
Hmm.
People see these exotic animals online and they think, oh, I want one of those.
So it's all about showing off.
Partly, but there's also this market for animal parts,
Right.
like in traditional medicine and stuff like that. That's just wrong. It's exploiting these animals for profit. Exactly. And it's having a devastating impact on wildlife populations worldwide.
They showed those smugglers in the documentary using all those crazy ways to hide the animals.
Yeah, like they had birds in bottles, eggs hidden in vests, even books with secret compartments.
Books with secret compartments. Come on, who thinks of that?
It's crazy, right? But it shows you how determined these smugglers are and how much money they're making.
Like they gave that example of the Malayan tiger, right?
Yeah, there's less than 200 left in the wild, but their parts are worth a fortune on the black market.
So basically, these poachers are driving these animals to extinction.
Pretty much. And it's all happening right under our noses online.
It's a lot to take in, all this dark web stuff, this extortion, the wildlife trafficking.
I know, it's heavy stuff.
It really makes you think twice about the internet.
It definitely does.
And it makes you wonder, like, what can we even do about it?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something we're going to dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get even more interesting.
Welcome back to our exploration of the internet's underbelly. Last time we talked about the dark web marketplace, sextortion, wildlife trafficking, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was heavy. But I'm curious, like, how do they actually do it? Like, how do these cyber criminals pull off these schemes? What are their tools?
Well, one thing they use a lot is social engineering. The documentary mentioned that a lot.
Yeah, social engineering, they kept saying that, but what does it even mean?
It's basically the art of manipulating people. Like, you're hacking But instead of computers, you're hacking humans.
Hacking humans? What, like messing with their brains?
Kind of. It's about using psychology to trick people into doing what you want.
Okay, so it's more like tricking people, not actually hacking their brains.
Right, tricking them into giving up information, downloading bad software, or even doing things that help the criminal directly.
So they're playing on people's emotions, like trust or fear.
Exactly. They use our natural instincts against us. Like, we tend to be helpful, we trust authority figures, and we react quickly when we feel pressured.
Right, like if someone says, you need to do this right now, you just do it without thinking.
Exactly. And the documentary had some scary examples of how this works in the real world. Like, remember the sextortion cases?
Yeah, those were disturbing.
A lot of times, they create these fake profiles on social media pretending to be someone attractive.
Oh, so they catfish people.
Yep, basically. They spend time building a relationship, making the victim feel special.
So they're grooming them.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
It's all about gaining their trust, lowering their inhibitions.
And then, bam, they manipulate them into sharing those compromising photos or videos.
Exactly. And once they have that, they've got the victim trapped.
That's just sick. And it makes you wonder, like, is anyone safe?
Well, it's important to be aware of these tactics because they're constantly evolving. Criminals are always finding new ways to exploit technology.
So it's not just about being careful who you talk to online. It's about being aware of how they can trick you.
Right. You got to be skeptical. Think critically about the information you share, the requests you get, and who you're really connecting with.
Because you never really know who's on the other side of the screen.
Exactly. And remember those pre-recorded videos they talked about?
Oh, yeah, the ones used in some sextortion scams. That was messed up.
It's a really deceptive tactic. You think you're on a live video call, but it's actually a pre-recorded video.
So they make it look like they're doing something, but they're not really there.
Right. They trick the victim into thinking it's a real-time interaction,
Yeah.
and then they pressure them to do something they wouldn't normally do.
And the whole time they're being recorded.
Yep. And that recording is then used for blackmail.
Wow, that's just like next level manipulation.
It is. And for law enforcement, trying to keep up with all these tactics, especially on the dark web, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, we were talking about that before, all the challenges they face.
The anonymity, the cryptocurrencies,
Mm.
the fact that these crimes can span across borders, it's a nightmare.
But they are working on it, right? Like they showed some of the things law enforcement is doing to fight back.
Oh yeah, they're definitely not giving up. They're developing new tools, new strategies, and they're working together more than ever.
I remember they mentioned undercover operations. Like they go undercover in these online communities.
Yeah, they have officers posing as buyers or sellers on those dark web marketplaces or
Yeah.
engaging in conversations with potential criminals.
That takes guts.
Yeah, it's dangerous work.
Mhm.
But they're getting results. They're gathering evidence, identifying suspects, and bringing people to justice.
And they're not doing it alone. International cooperation, right?
That's key.
Mhm.
Cybercrime crosses borders, so law enforcement has to work together.
Sharing information, coordinating investigations, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a global fight, and they're starting to treat it that way.
That's good to hear. But it can't just be about law enforcement, right? Like, what about preventing these crimes in the first place?
Oh yeah, prevention is huge. It all starts with education, making people aware of the risks.
So, like, teaching people about basic online safety.
Exactly. Strong passwords, being careful about what you share, knowing how to spot scams.
Right. Because if you don't know what to look for, it's easy to fall for these tricks.
Exactly. And it's especially important for young people. The documentary showed just how vulnerable they are, especially with sextortion.
Yeah, that was really sad. What can parents and educators do to help?
The most important thing is open communication. Talk to kids about the dangers online. Make sure they know they can come to you for help.
So they don't feel scared or shamed to ask for help if something happens.
Right. And teach them about online privacy, about setting boundaries, and about recognizing red flags.
It's like giving them the tools to protect themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about individuals. Social media platforms, they have a big responsibility too.
Yeah, they've got to do their part to make the internet safer.
Absolutely. They need better security measures, better content moderation, and they need to work with law enforcement.
We saw how those platforms are being used for wildlife trafficking, so they definitely have a role to play.
Yeah, they can use algorithms to flag suspicious stuff. They can partner with conservation organizations. There's a lot they can do.
So it's about striking that balance, right? Freedom of speech, but also protecting people.
Exactly. It's a tough challenge, but it's one they need to face head on.
And it's not just about reacting after the fact. They need to be proactive, prevent these things from happening in the first place.
Absolutely. They need to educate users, give them tools to protect themselves, and build a culture of responsibility online.
Right, like make people understand that even though it's the internet, there are still consequences for your actions.
Exactly. But, there's not all bad news. Technology can also be part of the solution.
Oh yeah, the documentary talked about some of the new tools being developed to fight cybercrime.
Yeah, they've got software that can detect cyber attacks, track cryptocurrency, even identify fake social media accounts.
So it's like a battle between good and evil, but with technology.
In a way, yeah. And as technology keeps evolving, we need to keep innovating, finding new ways to stay ahead of the bad guys.
And the documentary, it ended with a call to action. Like, what can we do to help?
Right, because it can feel overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can one person do?
Yeah, it feels like these are huge problems that are hard to solve.
They are, but every little bit helps. We can support organizations fighting cybercrime. We can report suspicious activity.
Like, if you see a scam or something, report it.
Exactly. Don't just scroll past it. Do something.
So it's about being aware, being proactive, and taking action when you see something wrong.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in making the internet safer.
Well said. So we've talked about the tactics, the challenges, and some of the ways to fight back.
And in the next part, we're going to look at the bigger picture, like what's being done on a global scale to address these issues.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the dark side of the internet. We've uncovered a lot of unsettling stuff, the dark web marketplaces, the sextortion, the wildlife trafficking. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's been pretty heavy.
But now I think it's time to focus on solutions. What's being done to combat these threats? And more importantly, what can we do to protect ourselves and others?
Right, because at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, this is all terrible, but what can I actually do about it?
Exactly. So where do we even start?
Well, the documentary, it really emphasized the role of law enforcement in all of this. Like, they're the ones on the front lines trying to disrupt these criminal networks.
Yeah, and we've talked about the challenges they face, the anonymity, the jurisdictional issues. It's a tough job.
Oh, absolutely. It's like trying to chase ghosts in the digital world. But they are finding ways to adapt. The documentary showed how they're using new tools, new tactics to try and stay ahead of these cyber criminals.
Like those undercover operations we talked about before, right? Sending officers into those online communities.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a digital detective. They pose as buyers or sellers on those dark web marketplaces, or they engage in conversations with potential criminals, all to gather evidence.
That's got to be some intense work, putting yourself out there like that.
Oh yeah, it's high stakes for sure. But they're getting results. They're identifying suspects, making arrests, shutting down operations.
And it's not just one country doing this, right? It's a global effort.
That's the key. Cybercrime, it doesn't respect borders, so law enforcement agencies around the world are starting to work together more and more.
Sharing information, coordinating investigations, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a global problem that requires a global solution.
That's good to hear. But it can't just be about catching the bad guys after the fact, right? What about preventing these crimes from happening in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. Prevention is huge. And it all starts with education. The more people understand about the risks and the tactics these criminals use, the better equipped they are to protect themselves.
So it's about empowering people to be smarter, more aware, and safer online.
Exactly. It's about teaching them how to create strong passwords, being careful about what information they share, knowing how to spot a scam. It's like those public service announcements, but for the digital age.
Right, because if you don't know what to look for, you're an easy target.
Totally. And this is especially important for young people. Remember those sextortion cases we talked about? How vulnerable those teenagers were?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. What can parents and educators do to help?
Open communication is so important. Just talk to your kids about the dangers online. Make sure they know they can come to you if something happens.
So they don't feel scared or ashamed to ask for help?
Exactly. And teach them about online privacy, about setting boundaries, and about recognizing red flags in those online interactions.
It's about giving them the tools to navigate this online world safely, right?
Right. And it's not just about individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Social media platforms have a huge responsibility in all this, too.
Yeah, they have a lot of power, a lot of influence.
Exactly. And they need to step up. They need to implement better security measures, stronger content moderation policies, and work more closely with law enforcement.
We saw how social media is being used for things like wildlife trafficking, so they definitely have a role to play.
Absolutely. They can do a lot more to be proactive. using algorithms to detect suspicious activity, partnering with organizations. There's a lot of potential there.
So it's a balancing act, right? Protecting free speech while also preventing harm.
It's a tough one, but it's a balance we need to find. And, it's not all doom and gloom. Technology, it can also be part of the solution.
Oh, yeah, the documentary talked about that, the new tools being developed to fight cybercrime.
Yeah, they're creating software to detect attacks, track those cryptocurrency transactions, even identify fake profiles.
So, like fighting fire with fire.
Kind of. And this is an ongoing thing, like an arms race. We have to keep innovating, staying ahead of the criminals.
Well, that's encouraging. But the documentary ended with a call to action, right? Like, what can we as individuals do to make a difference? It can feel kind of overwhelming.
I get it. It feels like a big problem. But every little bit helps. We can support organizations that are fighting cybercrime. Some help victims. Some work on legislation. Some focus on education. There are a lot out there.
And even just reporting suspicious activity online can make a difference.
Absolutely. If you see something shady, a scam, a weird account, anything, report it. Don't just scroll past it.
So it's about being aware, being proactive, and taking action. We all have a role to play, right?
Exactly. We can't just rely on the authorities to solve this. It takes all of us working together to make the internet a safer place.
Well, this has been a pretty intense journey exploring the dark side of the internet. We've seen the bad, the ugly, but also some glimmers of hope.
Yeah, definitely. It's not all doom and gloom. There are people fighting back, and there are things we can all do to protect ourselves.
So what's the biggest takeaway for you from all of this?
I think for me, it's realizing that the internet, it's not this separate world anymore. It's part of our everyday lives, and it comes with risks. But we can manage those risks. We can learn to navigate this world safely, and we can use technology for good.
Well said. This whole deep dive, it's been eye-opening, to say the least. But it's also empowering. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. The more we know about these threats, the better we can protect ourselves.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive, folks. We hope this has been informative, maybe a little bit scary, but ultimately empowering. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there in the digital world. We'll see you next time.